I'm Tim Loughton, the Member of Parliament for East Worthing and Shoreham, and here today on the 12th of September in Parliament we are debating and I hope passing this new bill, the International Development Official Development Assistance Target Bill, which is going to fulfil the promises that all the main parties made at the last election to enshrine in law that we spend 0.7% of our GDP, of our economy, each year on international aid, helping some of the poorest and most deprived countries in the world. Now, I support that target. I support this bill. I support international aid. I've been to some very poor countries and I've seen the effect that well-targeted practical aid, British aid and other countries, and we are one of the most generous donors, the second largest donor in the world, can bring to desperate people. As I've written in my newsletter recently, I've been in Jordan with a development charity out there, seeing some of the fantastic work they are doing for the millions of Syrian refugees who fled from disaster in that war-torn country, seeking refuge in Jordan, in Lebanon and other countries around the world. When I first became an MP back in 1997, one of the first countries I visited was Ethiopia, the fourth poorest country in the world. Been through years of civil war, years of drought, millions had died, suffered disease, and just don't have some of the basic facts of life that we take for granted, such as schooling, clean water, access to healthcare. One alarming fact which I found out then, and I don't think much has changed today, is that there are more Ethiopian doctors in New York than there are Ethiopian doctors in Ethiopia, and yet the need in Ethiopia for good health is huge. So what good does aid do? Well, just a few statistics. Because of British aid, a child in a deprived country is vaccinated against life-threatening diseases every 2 seconds. Every 2 minutes, because of that sort of healthcare and vaccination, we save the life of a child who would otherwise be condemned to death. In the last 4 years, British aid has helped more than 10 million children go to school. And education, as we all know, is the way out of poverty. 43 million people plus have now been given access to clean water, better sanitation and improved hygiene conditions because of British aid, your money, our taxpayers' money. Now, I know there are people who say, well, look, that's all very well, but particularly in times of austerity, charity begins at home, and surely we shouldn't be spending all these billions, and it is billions, on overseas aid, when actually we've got people suffering in this country, we've got people in deprivation in this country, we've got elderly people who need help with their energy bills, and we need people to get better, swifter treatment in our health service, we need to improve the conditions of education. I agree, we need all of that, but I don't think these two things are mutually exclusive. So I support international aid, and I support making sure it's something that we achieve not just 1 year for 2 years, but permanently, because it's the right thing to do. Now, any government in the future can change the law. Any government in the future even more easily can decide, no, we're not going to spend 0.7%, we're going to spend it all on something else. The thing that makes overseas aid really effective, the thing that gives a real chance to countries like Ethiopia and to Syrian refugees in Jordan and beyond, is continuity and sustainability of that aid programme. So that our aid organisations, the fantastic aid organisations that we have like Save the Children, whose staff and volunteers daily risk their lives, and we've seen some terrible cases recently of aid workers losing their lives in places like Syria, they put their lives on the line to go and help people in these desperate situations. They need to be assured that the resources are going to be there so that they can provide food and schooling for children, not just for a few weeks or a few months, but for years to come. To make sure we've got money going into setting up businesses so those people will have employment and a sustained growing economy in their own countries so that there are things to stay at home for. And we need to make sure that we've got trained doctors, trained teachers, nurses and other people in healthcare and education who want to and are able to stay in their own countries where their skills are particularly needed, like those doctors who left Ethiopia. So in supporting aid, in supporting this commitment, in supporting this bill, we're doing it not just because it's the right thing to do, because some people may challenge that, but it's in our interests as well. Because if we have stable economies, if we have growing countries who can begin to look after themselves when they get support in times of crisis, then it's more likely that people will build a life for themselves in those countries. They will build businesses. They will trade with us. Some of this money is going on taking British businessmen and women to countries in East Africa, as the Secretary of State for International Development has done recently, to help them set up businesses which will then trade with Britain, trade with British businesses, helping British jobs. We are buying lots of British-made Land Rovers and 4x4 vehicles to use in aid operations in many of these countries around the world. So there's something in it for us. And if we can keep those people in their own countries, because they are safe, because there are economic attractions to do it, then we wouldn't be having all this nonsense of all these supposed asylum seekers in Calais trying to climb over fences to get into the UK, because there'll be more going for them back in their own countries. So actually we can make sure we can do a lot more to help genuine asylum seekers, to help economic migrants, by keeping them in their own country where they can bring their skills to improve their own countries and not put further pressure, as we have on the UK with the growing population and all the pressures on infrastructure that actually brings as well. And there's another reason as well, because poverty also breeds extremism. And we've seen examples from countries like Yemen, from Somalia, and of course in Afghanistan, where the terrorists, the so-called Islamic militants, and of course most recently the ISIL fanatical fighters, they prey on the poverty and desperation of people in those communities to support them, to train them, to arm them, not just to cause mayhem and violence in their own countries, but to export that terrorism to Europe, to America, and to our own country in the United Kingdom. Combating poverty also combats terrorism. It rebuffs terrorism. It doesn't let terrorism get a hold in some of these deeply impoverished communities. So you may think, or you may not think, that spending our taxpayers' money on international aid is a good thing, is the right thing to do. I happen to do. But even if you don't think that, then it's in the best interests of the United Kingdom to help people in desperate conditions in their own countries, so they can trade with us, so that we can improve their health, so that we can make sure those populations flourish and stay in their own countries, rather than come and put pressure on our own country and the infrastructure pressures we already have. One of the things I'm really proud about as being British is we have a huge tradition of being generous to those countries in more desperate states than ourselves. Despite all the economic problems we have at the moment, which are fortunately starting to improve, we are still one of the world's richest nations, and I think we have a duty of care to countries around the world. And when I go to Jordan, as I did a few weeks ago, where 86,000 Syrian refugees are inhabiting one refugee camp, the Satari camp just across the border into Jordan from Syria, where I met many of those refugees who left, who fled in fright of their lives with just the clothes they stood up in. And we are giving them some stability, we are giving them safety, we are giving them nourishment, we're giving them water, we're giving them schooling, and that's because of British aid. And I'm immensely proud of that, and believe me, those people are immensely grateful for the contribution that Britain has made, continues to make, and I believe with this bill today will guarantee that British governments make in the future. It's not mutually exclusive that we support this or support things at home. We can do both, but these are some of the most desperate people in the world that we've been helping, and I just think we should take pride in that, and that's why I'm supporting the International Development Bill in Parliament today, and I hope you'll support it as well. And of course, if you want to make comments, if you have questions you want to raise, then I would very much like to hear from you and to take them head on, because I think we have a duty to do this. It's the right thing to do, but it's also the best thing to do for Britain and my constituents. Thank you for listening.